All right. Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us today for the Incorporating Cultural Values and Traditions into Policy, Procedure, and Practice webinar. My name is Sarah Nelson, and I'm the Universal Services Lead for the Capacity Building Center for Tribes. I'm an enrolled member of the Sault Ste. Marie Tribe of Chippewa, and I am proudly a Yooper from the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. However, I'm currently joining you today from the traditional homelands of the Nuwuvi, or the Southern Paiute in Las Vegas, Nevada. The Center for Tribes provides training and technical assistance to build the capacity of tribal child welfare programs and their workforce. In the spirit of Child Welfare Worker Appreciation Week, the Center for Tribes is delighted to host our colleagues with the Center for Native Child and Family Resilience as they share wisdom gathered in the Txin Kaangux initiative on St. Paul Island. I am joined today by my colleagues Jared Link and Esther Ann. The three of us will be moderating the chat and providing technical support as needed. Let's see. Okay, wonderful. I want to quickly remind folks that today's webinar is being recorded and it will be shared afterwards on the Center for Tribes YouTube page later this week. I encourage you to engage with our facilitators and your fellow attendees in the chat during today's webinar. Our team will also be using the chat during the webinar to share relevant links throughout the meeting. If you have a question at any point, there is a Q&A button that you can click and submit your question for folks to review, and our facilitators and presenters will respond to that on air. At the end of the presentation, you will see a link for a survey. We encourage you to share your feedback to help us improve our webinars and develop resources that best meet your needs. I am now going to pass the mic over to Joe Walker to begin our presentation.
Thank you. Good morning or good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to offer a prayer as we get started with today's activities. Creator, we humbly come before you, thanking you for all things. We ask that you be with us today and guide our conversation as we endeavor to help children and families wherever they may be. Creator, we ask that you watch over and protect our men and women in the military and in law enforcement and keep them safe from harm. Allow them to come home to the comfort of their families. Again, Creator, we thank you for all things. Aho. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Joe Walker. I'm Comanche, Cheyenne, and Lenape, or a member of the Delaware Tribe of Western Oklahoma. I'm the Indigenous Projects Program Lead for CNCFR, and I currently reside in Fernley, Nevada. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank my brothers and sisters and their ancestors of the Northern Paiute Tribe, whose lands I currently reside upon. Next.
All right, I guess that's me. Thanks, Joe. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today. My name is Sonia Ulrich, and I currently serve as the director for the Center for Native Child and Family Resilience. I am a social worker by trade and have worked in the field of child welfare for over 31 years. I am from the native village of Naknek, Alaska, and grew up on the traditional lands of the Yupik people. I am also a descendant of the Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa, and I'm speaking to you today from my current home in Olympia, Washington, on the lands of the Nisqually, Cowlitz, and Squaxin people. I want to thank you all for joining us today, and I'm going to turn it over to the rest of our team who will briefly introduce themselves. Sheridan?
Hi, good morning or afternoon. I'm Sheridan DeGrange with the Aleut Community of St. Paul Island. I have the honor of being their Family Services Director, and I've worked for them for the past 4.5 years and have 27 years in child welfare. My office is located in Anchorage on the Dena'ina homelands, and when I'm not in this office, I'm in my St. Paul office, which is about 50 to 60% of the time. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Ramona Tenorio. I am the president and owner of Broader Impact LLC. I have had the privilege of working with JBS and the St. Paul community on this project. I'm coming today from Brookfield, Wisconsin, just outside of Milwaukee, on the overlapping Kickapoo, Peoria, Potawatomi, and Ho-Chunk lands. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
Hi, everyone. My name is Cecilia Eva Tenorio, and I am the Spanish bilingual education project lead for Broader Impact. And I'm currently located in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, the traditional homelands of the Potawatomi, Ho-Chunk, Menominee, and Kickapoo nations.
Okay, next slide. All right, so we're going to begin the presentation by just giving everyone a general sense about the work of the center and the work that we've been doing that led us up to working with the Aleut Island of St. Paul. So the original name for the center was a mouthful. It's the National Quality Improvement Center for Preventative Services and Interventions in Indian Country. And in the first year of our grant, we chose to change the name to the Center for Native Child and Family Resilience. We are the recipients of the grant funded through the Children's Bureau, and we are nearing the completion of our first no-cost extension year. The original cooperative agreement was planned to end in September of 2022, but with COVID, we were not able to travel as much as we hoped, so we were able to stay on for an extra year and do some more work. The goals of the center are really to identify and promote tribally created solutions to child maltreatment and to disseminate the information about existing programs that are showing promise in Indian Country. So we're honored today to be co-presenting with our colleagues from the community of St. Paul and our consultants who helped us in our work. Next slide.
Our mission is to collaborate with tribal nations, communities, and community-based organizations to enhance or develop the evidence base of culturally congruent models of prevention and intervention services, to gather and disseminate information about tribally relevant practice models, interventions, and services that contribute to child maltreatment prevention efforts and family resilience, and to also use community-based evaluation models which are compatible with Indigenous ways of knowing. Next. We utilize Indigenous ways of knowing in the communities we work within in order to fully understand the tribal nation and the various communities and people within that nation. In order to fully understand who they are, their wishes, their dreams, and their vision for the future. To do that, we use storytelling to gather information coupled with cultural humility, ceremony, taking into account cultural values, beliefs, and practices. Next.
All right. So one of the first things that we did when we opened the center was to complete a full and comprehensive literature review. We scanned hundreds of articles. We narrowed the focus of the literature to no farther back than the year 2000, focused on peer review literature and research on tribal programs. We noted a central finding of the literature that we did review demonstrated that what we probably already knew, that culture matters in programs serving tribal communities. Our team also noted that the literature we did locate and review was really not adequate to capture the importance and connection of culture as a protective factor in the programs that were being evaluated. You're going to see a lot of materials today, and I just want to urge you all to take a few minutes to visit our website. You can download a full copy of the literature review, a summary of findings, and we also have an accessible, searchable database where you can search for the articles and review the ones that we used in the literature review. You can just Google Center for Native Child and Family Resilience, and it will pop right up. Next slide.
This slide gives you an idea of what we're talking about when we say cultural resilience factors. There's no way that we could include all of them on one slide because it varies from tribe to tribe, even from person to person. And so there's way too many to add to one slide, but this just gives you an idea of what we're talking about. As you know, that varies from tribal nation to tribal nation. So it's really up to the researcher or provider to find out what those consist of for the tribe that you're currently collaborating with. Next.
Okay, so following our literature review, we continue to do outreach and identify and review programs that existed that were not addressed in the literature. We interviewed community members, we sought out referrals, we made tons of phone calls to search for community-based programs and document all that we could find. We were able to identify culturally founded wellness models that we believe have a significant impact on the resiliency of families and communities. And many of the models we found were really tribally focused, tribally specific, meaning that they really just addressed the program needs for a particular tribal community, and they were not necessarily more generic or intertribal solutions. We found that successful programs often involved community members as key players in the design and implementation of these interventions, and the community members often served as advisory or facilitators for the program. As we gathered the information, we categorized the particular programs by whether or not they were tribally created, tribally adapted, or whether they showed promise for working within the tribal community. Next slide. Okay, so this slide here is the only time you'll see a chart in our presentation, but it is the summary of the environmental scan at a high level. So as you can see, what we found was a clear relationship between the level of tribal adaptation of the program and the prevention and intervention target. So in other words, programs that were categorized as promising and not adapted tended to target more risk factors on average, compared to those that were tribally adapted or tribally created. So you'll notice in the scan, when you go pull it, that programs targeting risks and deficits decreased as the level of tribal ownership or involvement increased. So we believe this really served to illustrate the importance of a strength-based approach to Indigenous prevention and intervention efforts. And we also noted that there was a remarkable pattern in the average number of cultural resilience factors manifesting in programs at each of the tribal adaptation levels, demonstrating a really opposite pattern from those of risk factors. So simply put, tribally created models and programs target significantly more cultural resilience factors than tribally adapted programs, as well as programs categorized as promising not adapted. And it's important to note that the tribally created programs do not completely abandon the use of risk or protective factors, but the findings show that the engagement of cultural resilience factors demonstrates a relationship to increased tribal agency and uplifting Indigenous ways of knowing. So again, this is also located on our website. And this information is foundational to kind of understanding our role as we were working with the Aleut Island of St. Paul. But Joe is going to proceed to tell us about the other projects we also worked with, and all of this is on our website. Joe?
Thank you. The Center for Native Child and Family Resilience worked with 5 unique tribes located in Alaska and throughout the western and central portion of the United States. For the Cowlitz Indian tribe, their goals were to identify and transmit traditional and contemporary Cowlitz culture, cultural values, and practices throughout the tribe's health and human services programs, and also include participation in Cowlitz cultural activities and events. For the My Two Aunties program, their goal was to empower and strengthen the resiliency of Native families by providing holistic and culturally based services to meet their needs and to promote self-sufficiency and generational wellness through the development of a trauma-informed clinic and integrated prevention model. The Txin Kaangux initiative goal was to demonstrate and evaluate the initiative, which was a holistic approach to healing and wellness, as an evidence-based, promising practice for addressing the needs of families with children at risk for entering the foster care system. The Ogallala Lakota Children's Justice Center looked at the effectiveness of the program in one or more of its components, such as traditional therapy through ceremony, advocacy, collaboration, and community education as they relate to children, adolescents, and adult behavior associated with child maltreatment. The Yeshkawu Shawat is the Native Women's Counseling and Treatment Initiative. Their goal was to formalize a pilot, evaluate, refine, and export an existing family-focused, culturally based counseling treatment model for addressing the complex issues of domestic violence, abuse, unresolved grief, historical and intergenerational and related traumas. However, for today's presentation, the focus will be primarily on the Txin Kaangux initiative. Sheridan?
Next slide, please. Real quick, this will be a very high-level overview due to time. So as we move through this, please bear with me, and I'm happy to provide more information at a later date should you want more. Next slide, please. Okay, St. Paul Island. St. Paul is one of 5 Pribilof Islands located in the middle of the Bering Sea. We're located 300 miles from Alaska's mainland and 800 miles from Anchorage, the closest urban center, and 300 miles north of the Aleutian chain. St. Paul is one of 2 inhabited islands of the Pribilof Islands. The population is approximately 345 year-round residents. St. Paul is considered the Galapagos Islands of America. We have people from all over the world travel to our community for bird watching. So if any of you have seen the movie The Big Year with Jack Black or Owen Wilson, you've heard of our tiny island and its relevance to birding. The image above is an image of Alaska, but if those of you who are familiar with Alaska, part of it's missing. So the Aleutian chain it extends down probably to where the blue triangle is. And if you look more to the right, the southeast panel is missing. So the reason why we selected this slide is we wanted to show where the Pribilof Islands are. So the 2 tiny islands in the middle of the Bering Sea. Then if you shift your focus away from the map into the couple at the bottom right of your screen, the people of St. Paul Island are Unangan, otherwise known as Aleut. However, the community members of St. Paul prefer to be called Unangan, which is their traditional name. The term Aleut was given to the Unangan people by the Russian fur traders. The image above reflects the cultural and traditional clothing of the Unangan people. Next slide, please. Okay, we're going to go over a little bit of our history. To better understand our work and the challenge that we experience, I'm going to briefly touch on a couple of historical events and the impact the impact it had on our community members. Just to be clear, I won't be touching on all of our history, but rather highlighting a couple of our historical events. In 1788, the Russian-American company served and relocated the Unangan people from Atka and Unalaska, their home of origin, to the Pribilof Islands to hunt, clean, and prepare fur skins. The fur seals. The Unangan people lived in inhumane conditions. They were beaten and they were controlled by the fur trading company. This continued until 1910 when the first seal treaty ended private sealing on the island and placed the community and the seals under the U.S. Bureau of Fisheries. The Unangan people who remained on the island were left to live in inhumane conditions. Food was scarce, there was racial segregation, and the working conditions were poor. In the summer of 1942, the Japanese troops began to bomb the Aleutian Islands. As a result of these actions, the U.S. government forcibly evacuated many of the communities on the Aleutian chain and the Pribilof Islands. For those in St. Paul, the evacuation came on June 14, 1942, during a community baseball game. The U.S. Navy officials interrupted the game and ordered the community to return to their homes to pack 1 suitcase per person to take with them on what they were told would be, they were going to relocate them to a safer location. Sadly, this was far from the case. The Unangans were crammed on the Delarov, pictured above. The vessel was designed to carry 300 people. However, the vessel was crammed with 560 people from the Aleutian and Pribilof Islands. Men, women, and children were crammed together. Sickness spread easily in such a tight space. And the only doctor on board refused to provide medical treatment to the evacuees. For those who survived the voyage, they were taken to the internment camps in Southeast Alaska. The majority of the Unangan people were placed at Funter Bay to live in an abandoned cannery and in tents. The living conditions were deplorable. Access to potable water was a daily challenge due to freezing, poor pipes, inadequate flow, and contamination. Food preparation was complicated by the lack of adequate kitchen facilities and familiarity with local subsistence foods. The facilities were not intended for winter occupancy as they had no insulation or heating stoves. Besides the conditions at the camp, the Unungan people were not accustomed to living in Southeast Alaska. This is, the difference there too is out in St. Paul, we don't have animals that can harm us unless you get in the ocean. And so they weren't accustomed to living in an environment where bears are walking in the community. They also weren't familiar with how to cook or hunt for salmon. Though we live on the ocean, we do not eat salmon that often. So that was an area that they had to learn. So these two examples are just examples of where the Unungan people were once again depleted of their culture and identity and language. Throughout the existence of child welfare programs, we all know that Indigenous people are disproportionately represented in the foster care system. Here in Alaska, Native Alaskan children represent approximately 60% of the children in foster care. Through the loss of the generation, the history is being lost, and so are the people's identity, their language, and their tradition. As a result, the tribe of St. Paul recognized the need to do something different to change the outcome for the people and future generations. Next slide, please. Okay. Next slide. Sorry, I skipped a slide there. So part of doing something different, we recognized that we needed to look at our past and our trauma and identify ways to support our community. One example of what we do in our community is we hold our annual evacuation walk. And this is a critical event for the community to remember those lost at the internment camps and to honor the strength and survival of those who return to resettle the islands after the 2-year evacuation. As a participant of this walk, I can tell you it's very emotional. In 2019, I had the opportunity to participate in my first walk. And as the community gathers, we all come together and we collect a flower to place at the bay when we get to the end of our walk. We also sign in as a way to document how we acknowledge those who came before us. The walk itself, we start at the baseball field and we sing traditional songs and drum as we walk to the bay. For me personally, it was very touching because I'm of Jewish ancestry, and I couldn't help but also think how so many of my relatives were taken via train to concentration camps. And so knowing or not knowing where you're going was very impactful. I don't think I've ever experienced an event that touched me as much as this did. I cried the whole way. It's a very powerful event, and I try to make it annually because I want to honor those who came before me and my children's generation. Next slide, please. In recognition of additional healing, the Txin Kaangux initiative was developed and outlined the definition of healthy people for the community. This definition does not refer to the health of the physical body, but it also reaches the mind, spirit, and reflects the individual relationship to other peoples, their environs, and the opportunity to learn and grow. To achieve this well-rounded idea of health and wellness, the Txin Kaangux initiative integrates a broad service array to cover entry points for families at higher risk of child maltreatment, ideally long before they come to become involved with the child welfare system. A key member of this vision is Judge David Abraham Bullock. Judge Bullock is a well-respected tribal judge, ICWA counsel, author, and educator. His wise words and visions help us move forward in this project. Next slide, please.
The Txin Kaangux initiative is based in part on reclaiming personal sovereignty over your everyday decisions. And through a process of beginning with the Russians and slavery to hunt fur mammals like sea otters and fur seals, the sovereignty of the Unangan Aleut people has been whittled away by folks who wanted to control them for the fur industry. So this project is about reclaiming that strict sense of ethical sovereignty that the Unangan people have in their culture, so that they make decisions all day long that are healthy for themselves, for their family, and they're very careful not to bring shame or unnecessary suffering that comes from poor decision making. And so it's accepted in their culture that bad behavior is a false path. It's not a legitimate path to choose. So court systems are usually a triage emergency room for when antisocial behaviors run afoul of the law. So I'm one of the first stops when there's a problem or a sickness in the community. And so this idea of holistic healing, a deep wellness, and a personal ethical sovereignty fits perfectly with the tribal court, because we have no interest in punishing people. We have interest in learning from our mistakes so that they don't happen again. And so the Txin Kaangux TK initiative fits hand in glove with restorative justice principles and building people up.
Okay, one critical piece of the Txin Kaangux Initiative prevention medicine model is the reclamation and reinvigoration of cultural practices, values, language as a source of resilience, strength, and healing. The initiative builds upon the Unangan values and customs. It also provides a safe space to take past trauma into consideration to move forward in the path to wellness. By recognizing where we come from, we build our resilience, which is a fundamental protective factor that seeks to remediate risks of maltreatment to children and healing the intergenerational impacts of trauma. Building cultural resilience is also critical in the workforce. Who we are and where we come from flourishes and continuously affects our every facet of our daily lives. Your beliefs, your passions, your behaviors, and your ambitions, to name a few. It's an umbrella term that governs overall behavior. It's something that is learned from experience and is passed down from generation to generation. It's an aspect of life that brings us together. Next slide, please. The Txin Kaangux Initiative empowers the community to build upon strong, resilient families by recentering health and emphasizing each other's interconnectedness with their entire community rather than focusing on the individual well-being in isolation. The initiative is a roadmap for returning the community to traditional values that will help people see their worth, their role in keeping the entire community safe. The initiative is returning to traditional values, offering traditional and culturally based services that will help the people see their value and roles in keeping their community safe. Next slide. Then the hope of the initiative is to restore the culture, create a healthier family, and to develop strong and sustainable workforce. Next slide, please.
Next slide. So the center used the process of mind mapping with the project sites to generate meaningful conversations about outcomes, evidence, and data, and to support the participatory engagement of project sites in planning and developing the evaluation model. It's basically a brainstorming strategy combining left and right brain thinking to draw out innate knowledge that each person has, or each person on the team has, or had at that time, and beliefs of a group or a team. For purposes of the center work, the mind mapping exercise was intended to identify the community's outcomes of interest for the evaluation period. So let's take a quick look at the process we used. Next. We began the process through the creation of a picture by asking the team to think about what images they see when we talk about the program and evaluation. In the beginning, there was hesitancy. People felt vulnerable, and it was not without challenges. Just like any change is not without challenges. This first image illustrates what happens when people are out of sync with those around him or her, and how the work is a lot easier when everyone works together. The individuals rowing in the Baidarka, and the Baidarka is a 3-person kayak, but the individuals rowing in the Baidarka, which is the Yinangam Tanu word for kayak, demonstrates the importance of working together. When rowers are not rowing in unison, as shown by the left Baidarka, this makes the journey more strenuous and frustrating. However, when the struggling rower has someone modeling and leading from the front and someone supporting them from behind, this gets us to the second Baidarka, or the one which is shown on the right, with everyone rowing together and making the work a lot easier. This first image came up like this because as we were talking to them about the instructions, and it didn't happen immediately. It happened over a period of meetings where we met every week, and we started out by, let's draw an image of what we want the future project to look like, and also taking into account the work that we're currently doing or we will be doing to reach that point in the future. This is one of the things that they pointed out, is that, it's easier if we all work together, if we're all on the same page, as you can tell by the rowers in the right Baidarka. Also, take note of the tree on this first image. Next. This is the next picture, which shows the tree being replaced by pushkis, since these plants grow all over the island, but trees do not. The pushki symbolizes the roots, culture, traditions, history, and way of life for people in the community. What is beneath the surface is responsible for all that blooms and flourishes on the island. So it's always important to remember your roots, where you come from. And the sun symbolizes what the rowers are traveling toward, which is light, warmth, energy, love, and life. Next. The next step in this activity was to identify what was called activation words. Activation words come immediately to you when you look at the picture, and is based upon the question, what do you think of when you look at this picture? And think about the work we are doing and will do in the near future. And so we wanted to come up with that image or that picture in the middle that would represent what we want the project, or what the team wanted the project to look like in the future, and taking into account the let's work together, we all enjoy each other's company, don't forget your roots, that sort of thing. So what does this tell you? And so that's where we come up with the activation words. Next. So after we constructed the activation words around the picture, we chose one of the words and asked the team, what does this word make you think of? And then, we'd go around the team and they'd all provide some information about what that word would make them think of. For example, you can see the first word up there, tradition. That made some of the team members think of our way of life, culture, subsistence. And then as the responses kind of slowed, we'd follow up with what else does it make you think of? So we're trying to dig as deep as we possibly can to get to the real issues that the team thinks is important. Next. And after all that work, this is the final image that is a visual representation of the project and illustrates what the Txin Kaangux initiative team wanted to see in the future for their community. One other part of the image is the reflections of the hearts that are beneath those rowing in the Baidarkas. This was done to remind us that the love and spirit that guides our work, even if not always visible, is always there. Next. This is a video of Judge David Volokh, who will be discussing his view of the mind map activity. Judge V is the presiding judge for the Aleut Community of St. Paul Island.
And participating in the TK Initiative mind mapping project, I think I can easily say was the most valuable thing I've been involved in yet. And it brought together the entire team. First, we had a talented artist that brought forward the image, and everyone felt comfortable to express themselves and to build and to change and to make suggestions and to try things on and then put them down. And through this process of months of a group brainstorm, and you have to create a safe environment, particularly a lot of Native people are very soft-spoken, and unlike me, aren't busy being boisterous to be heard, to grab attention. So you have to create quiet and a safe place for still small voices to come out, and it happened. And so we were able to build a mind map image and concepts that captured this program beautifully and inspired all of us. And I'm still inspired by it. So it was extremely valuable. And participating in the TK Initiative.
I would just like to echo what Judge Bullock had said about the mind mapping exercise. It was probably the most valuable effort that we made. It brought our team together. When we see our posters now throughout our buildings, it brings a sense of pride to those of us who were present for that time. And it also set the direction that we wanted to take our initiative. And Judge makes it sound like it was smooth and easy, and there were some times that we really were like, please give us feedback, we need feedback. But with that time and pause, we created a beautiful picture, and today we all are so proud of that, and we're moving forward in our work. But back to my slide here. So implementing the See a Change was next. In order to determine how to do that, surveys were created, one for the community and one for the tribal government staff. The purpose of the community survey was to identify the services that we had available in our community, then explore what the level of awareness was on the survey. Unfortunately, that's where we were lacking, but we were really thankful to have that information. And then we also wanted to take that opportunity to share with the community how to prevent child maltreatment in our community. In order to do that, we met with individuals one-on-one, we did group think tanks, and then we really wanted to hear from our elders. So we hosted several meetings with them. Sometimes they were individuals, and sometimes they were just at a lunch or a tea where we sat down and we got information from them, because they have our historical knowledge, and that knowledge can bring us forward in the future. When it came to the tribal government survey, it was designed to identify our strength areas and areas that needed some enhancement. We looked at our benefit package, our communication, and overall satisfaction within the workplace. But because our tribal government is so small, we also recognized that we needed to afford participants the opportunity to provide honest feedback without any retribution. So to do that, we allowed staff to do to do an interview with a third party, where notes would be taken but not direct quotes. They could also submit something in writing if they'd like, or they could just meet with somebody, a coworker, who could also take the notes. We really wanted to put great effort to get that honest feedback from them. At the completion of the survey, we analyzed the information, we looked for commonalities, and then based on that information, not all of it was a surprise, but it was very apparent that we needed to do a better job at communicating with staff and create some onboarding process for the newly hired staff. And Ramona will speak more to that. Next slide, please.
So the work with the Txin Kaangux initiative, as well as the other projects within CNCFR, we were tasked with the responsibility of developing things like a program manual, an implementation guide. The program manual will talk, of course, about the program. The implementation guide would provide guidance and hints and tricks on what you need to be aware of in order to implement something like this in your community. We also had to develop an evaluation report. For the Txin Kaangux initiative, we developed program brochures, which was not as easy as you would think it would be. And these were already existing. All we did was just enhance them as a team. And there was also other employee materials like the personnel recruitment and onboarding policies, the Txin Kaangux training for new personnel, the onboarding manual for new staff, which will be talked more about by Ramona and Cecilia next. Thank you. Next.
Great. Oh, no, you back up a little bit. Thank you. Yeah, so in this section, we're going to kind of go over the culturally responsive approach that we took in developing the recruitment and onboarding policy and procedures leading to practice. During these next couple slides, I'm going to share a little bit about the vision and the development of the policy and procedures. Sometimes I'll refer to as just the P&P for short during this presentation. We'll explore a little bit about what cultural responsiveness is, as that is the approach we took in developing the P&P, and why cultural responsive approach is important. We'll look at some specific examples of how we weaved cultural values that the community identified through the previous processes that were just discussed throughout this project and work. I'll share a little bit more about the process, including some of the different ways that the work is presented versus in a physical document, a PowerPoint, as well as Canvas teaching modules, which Cecilia will go deeper in about. And then lastly, I'll share a little bit more on onboarding and share an onboarding checklist that was developed to help organizational leaders with the process of onboarding their new talent force. Next. So when we started this project at Broader Impact in collaboration with CNCFR and the folks in up at St. Paul, we were truly amazed and inspired by the work of the evaluation work and everything that had preceded to get us to the point of the policy and procedures. And you'll see that a lot of the vision, the imagery, the language, the inspiration was taken from this previous work and from the mission and vision that was developed and created by the community. The goals of the Txin Kaangux initiative can be understood through a vision and narrative described using their metaphor of the sea of change. And it allows the community to travel from, as was just said before, where they are to where they hope to be in the future. Next. So again, the starting place for the development of the policy and procedures was with the community, and specifically their community-driven values. Next. These values drove the work and were the foundation of the culturally responsive personnel recruitment and onboarding policy and procedures. These 9 community-driven values, which I'll share in a moment, guide how Txin Kaangux initiative recruits, retains qualified, knowledgeable, and experienced personnel, and to support their critical programs and services to the community. These values include, and we're going to click through, I think, so it's 9 clicks. So if you want to start now, relationship, tradition, spirituality, resilience, identity, accountability, holistic, contribution, and balance. And each of these values, you'll see, became the foundation of sections on the P&P, and they are deeply embedded within the framework of the P&P. Next. So embedding community voices and values is an example of cultural responsiveness. And according to the National Center of Culturally Responsive Educational Systems, quote, cultural responsiveness is the ability to learn from and relate respectfully with people of your own culture, as well as those from other cultures. Dr. Nicole Bowman, a traditional Lenape woman and an evaluation innovator, and a dear colleague of mine, understands that Native culturally responsive approaches use and incorporate Indigenous values, beliefs, and practices that include cultural content, language, sovereignty of the Indigenous peoples, and tribal First Nations. The work of cultural responsiveness is part of a community participatory practice that is meaningful and important to the community. It is a process and commitment that centers tribal and First Nations to be visible, represented, and empowered. In the chat, I welcome you all to share a definition of cultural responsiveness that you have. What are additional considerations that are meaningful for you and your community when considering cultural responsiveness? As these are not, what I've listed before, are not all inclusive and all encompassing, but so I welcome you to share in the next few moments what cultural responsiveness means to you. If you had an opportunity to include cultural responsiveness in any of your own projects, please share a little example of that in the chat and with the rest of the group. Okay, we see individualized considerations. Never assume that the entire group is the same. Very good. A collective mindset. I have been on a learning journey to understand gender diversity. Cultural responsiveness. WTN has included a position for cultural support worker who connected with the tribal practices such as dancing at powwow and getting named. Beautiful. Feel free to continue to enter any other examples of cultural responsiveness as we go forward. And I thank you to all of you who've contributed in the chat so far. Next. So as part of an intricate talent force ecosystem, all of us, we all contribute to the realization of these values and only progress forward through community cooperation and collaboration. And that was the basis, understanding for including community voices and transforming the understanding of people in the workplace as talent force, knowing that each of us and each of them bring talent and purpose to our positions within an organization. And just as the Sea of Change image that was shared earlier by Joe depicts those paddling in the Bidarka, demonstrate the importance of us working together. Again, when each paddler is not paddling in unison, the journey is more strenuous and frustrating. And similarly, when personnel exhibit respect and accountability in their roles in the workplace, they contribute to the holistic harmony, balance, and resilience of the organization and the larger community. Next. In the next 3 slides, I'm going to share kind of a before and after, and you'll have an opportunity to see what policies looked like before, and we'll be able to kind of share with each other some of the transformational differences that we see. So this, in this image right here, was the original policy on grievances. And I'm going to just pause a moment to allow you to look it over, to think about what you see, what you read, what you notice within this format. And then we'll compare it to the next slide, which shows a glimpse, not yet, just I'm going to let them look at it a little bit more. In the next slide, we're going to be able to see what it looks like after embracing a cultural responsive approach. So just a few moments just to give you a time to look at it, to read it, and to notice. Okay, next. And here's an excerpt of how, using a cultural responsive approach, we transform the policy. So again, I want to just pause here a moment, allow you to think about what you see, what you read, and notice the transformational differences. How does this policy look different than the one previously? What do you notice? What do you see? What's been incorporated and what's been left behind? Next. So in the chat, I'm going to ask you to share some more. In what ways, and we'll leave these questions up there to give you a reference point to answer, but in what ways did the new version incorporate Indigenous cultural responsiveness? What additional ways could a, quote, grievance policy be transformed? And what would you include in your own communities? Amanda says, less technical and Western. Esther, values up front. Mindy, values show through this one. Lillian, this policy focuses on equality and inclusion versus punitive authority. Very good. Yeah, those were all of the things that I was thinking about, and really trying to put myself in the place of those, who would read it. How would I want to be spoken to? How could we write it in a way that is responsive to the values that the community has so carefully and generously shared with us all? Okay, I see that there's 2 questions in the Q&A. If anyone would like to respond to, let me take a look. Katie says, in some tribal nations, sharing details like cultural values and practices with individuals outside of the community is not acceptable. How can you do this work if that is the case for the community you are working with? It's a really wonderful question. I welcome any of the other facilitators as well to jump in and share their thoughts on this question. Well, I'll bring some thoughts, and it's not an authoritative or definitive response, but it is just one way. I would always revert to thinking about cultural humility in these cases. That is the approach that I try to do in all the work and encounters that in my own work, and be respectful of the community's choice about that. it would be a process. Perhaps it's something that you could share and show how it might look and get approval that way. Or, since this policy and procedure manual in our case was often they are for the community that are working in these spaces, it was appropriate and acceptable. But I think that's the key, is just making sure that communication is there, that humility is there, and that you take the guidance and the wisdom of the community that you're working with. And again, anyone else who has any thoughts, either the facilitators, or if there's someone else who has an actual example of doing this, please feel free to put that in the chat. The other question in the Q&A is, were all of the staff in the TK project tribal nation members, or were their non-native staff as well? How was that considered or addressed in this work? It's a really great question.
So there was a variety. Obviously, I'm Caucasian, and so there was a mix. We had Caucasian, we had Alaskan Native. We have a variety of people who work with us. We also have African Americans who work with us. So we allowed everyone the opportunity. But for those of us who are not Unangan or Alaskan Native, we wanted to hear from the folks on the island who do know the culture. We have to learn from them. So that was the perspective we looked at this project from, is that we are here to learn from them and incorporate their values and traditions. And really, again, like Judge V said, you take a step back and you let people move forward and share their thoughts and their visions. I'm not here to set a vision. I'm here to help assist their vision.
Thank you so much. We'll keep going. Again, feel free to put more questions out there or respond in chat as we continue. So next slide, please. We developed a couple different platforms for the policy and procedures for different reasons. It was first initially developed as part of the project as a document. It ended up being a 283-page PDF document, with the main document being on around 42 pages, and the remaining being appendices with additional information, forms, and policy references. And that is actually located on the website. And I will go ahead and show a little bit about that. So let me share my screen, if I can share my screen. All right. And this is on the website, and this is what the document that was developed. And I just want to kind of scroll through just to give you what it looks like. Again, you'll notice a distinction between the way policies were written before, what are you seeing, how it's laid out. And later on, I will share some more aspects. We'll dig a little bit deeper into some of the components of the PMP, but I wanted to share with you what it looks like, and that the resource is available online for people to look at. Okay. So just a little bit more, that after we developed the actual document, we realized that we wanted a format in which organizational leaders could use the content to give a presentation. So we transformed it into a PowerPoint for a new personnel welcome and orientation. And that is here. Are you able to see that in the shared screen, or is it still okay? So this was transformed into a PowerPoint presentation, which was a little bit more interactive. We had built-in questions. We had think, pair, shares. We were able to put in breaks. This could be something that could be utilized to give an orientation to new personnel, perhaps on their first day of joining the organization as part of their onboarding. So this is the next iteration, if you will, of the policy and procedures. I'm gonna stop sharing there, and if we want to go back to the other share, great. And so let's see. And then finally, after we completed the PowerPoint, which was really great to allow for building in activities and interaction, we understood that not everyone has access to do in-person trainings, or that even if the PowerPoint could be done virtually, which it could, it can still be tricky with internet connection not always working, and that sometimes happens on the island. So we decided to transform the PMP into another more accessible format using Canvas. And Broader Impact's educational consultant, Cecilia Tenorio, will now share how she developed the PMP using Canvas.
Thank you. Yes, so we decided, as Ramona mentioned before, to take all the content that is in the 283-page manual and convert it into an online learning course. It's hosted by Canvas, which is a learning management system similar to Blackboard or Moodle, if you might be familiar with it. And I'm going to be sharing my screen on the actual Canvas course itself, so I can do a brief little walkthrough and show you all what that looks like. So I currently have the Canvas course in student view. So this is what it would look like for new personnel and employees. This is the home page, and again, all the content that you would read and receive in the document, and the majority of the content as well that is provided in the PowerPoint presentation has been converted into a 7-unit online learning course. So we have the different units laid out in these modules, learning modules, and the purpose and intention is clearly aligned in the landing and homepage. I wanted to click over on the modules page to guide you through what that looks like. One thing that we tried to do while designing the course was maintaining all the culturally responsive imagery throughout and the language and incorporation of the values. So we also made sure to provide the groundwork and foundations for the history and background of the Nangan community. Each module begins with a unit overview of the content. Then the content is provided by clicking next. And then finally, what we do is at the end of each unit or module, there is a check-in. So we use the word check-in versus a quiz because this is meant to be a formative assessment for the employees to use. It's not graded. It's not supposed to stress anyone out. It's just a way for those to kind of check in with themselves and see if they're understanding the content. So a lot of these images you'll recognize from the presentation. We wanted to maintain it as consistent as possible. And then just for another example, we looked previously at the resolution support, how it changed. This is what this section looks like in the course. So once again, just another format. And then linking as well the wording from the original policy and procedure document. I wanted to show what a check-in quiz looked like. So each check-in is 3 short questions. Some of them are true or false. Some of them are multiple choice. And again, the goal is to have a little bit more dynamic interactions with those who are going through the course. There's unlimited tries, but in order to continue on, you must get a 3 out of 3. So here's some examples of the questions asked. And finally, on our Canvas course, we also were able to upload all of the appendix documents in the files and resources section of the course. That way, in case anybody needs to go back or refer, reprint, all of these documents are located under the Canvas course as well. So hopefully I'm not making anyone dizzy with the scrolling. Now Ramona will continue with a little bit more information on our on the onboarding procedure.
Thank you so much. So next slide. Oh, sorry, you can go through these. We had a couple slides on here just in case we ran into some technology issues, but check that up right here. Everything looks great. So the last section of the recruitment and onboarding process I wish to share today is the onboarding checklist. And this was something that we developed to really help organizational leaders in a very tangible way to get prepared for bringing on new personnel. So onboarding new personnel to an organization takes time, it takes effort, resources, patience, and commitment. An effective onboarding happens as a progressive and iterative process. It is not something that's completed after an orientation. Sorry, I don't know why my camera is off. After an orientation is done, or even after the first week of starting a new position. It often can take a new employee up to a full year or even beyond that to fully practice and grasp all aspects of their role. For the Txin Kaangux initiative, thoughtful and empathetic integration and onboarding was framed within the cultural idea of living together as one. New personnel must learn and effectively navigate not only their specific duties and responsibilities, but a whole new organizational culture, including expectations for interpersonal interactions, new technology, written and unwritten rules, policies, and procedures. And so to help, again, to begin to help organizational leaders prepare for and onboard new personnel, we developed a checklist. So if you want to just go ahead and click on that link, onboarding checklist. I don't need to share my screen, but if you want to click on that and we can just scroll down a little bit, it'll pop it open. Or it should. Did it not do it? If not, I can go ahead and share the screen. Oh, there it is. Perfect.
Great.
Oh, does everyone see the little boxes on it though?
Yeah.
Why don't I go ahead and share my screen and it'll be without it. Okay, here we go. So one of the things I just want to point out in this, it's several pages long and it's really a template to be completed by whoever is onboarding a new person. And there's basically 4 components to this onboarding checklist. The first one has to do with kind of the final recruitment process. As recruitment is wrapping up, folks should start to think about how do we then begin onboarding, the notification of letter of employment, the new hire documents, are gathered. This is all part of also not only closing out recruitment, but bringing people on board. And then we have preparing for new hires' first day. This is really important. And I like to use an analogy of inviting people to a dinner party. You know, if you want to invite folks to a dinner party, you don't have them come and not have the dinner table set, the food ready, the space set for them, and the environment prepared. And it's very similar to, you know, when we're getting ready to bring new talent onto our team, we want them to feel that there's been thought in preparation of, for their coming on board and being part of the organization. And so this can start well in advance. So preparing ahead of time for their first day, that could include, you know, setting their work space, getting keys, providing codes and logins, making sure that email accounts and phone systems are set up, getting your orientation PowerPoint together, making sure that you have a new hire welcome packet with all the pertinent forms for them to complete, etc. And then we have some suggestions for the first day of employment. That may be the day that you do a new hire orientation. And if they're on site, another great thing to do is to give them a walking tour of the organization, introduce them to their colleagues, show them their workspace, and allow them time to sit at their space and to make it their own. It would be a time to get their keys. And then the first week of employment may be making sure that they are set up and invited to attend important meetings for their new role, and having a check-in with their supervisors, and completing more in-depth training that is centered around their day-to-day work and activities. So thank you so much for allowing me to share a little bit about the policy and the recruitment and onboarding policy and procedures manual. And I'll turn it over to Sheridan.
Great, thanks. So not only was that a great checklist for the individual who's coming on board, but for supervisors as well. I think in our day-to-day, we get caught up in all the other demands, and sometimes we overlook the basics of welcoming people, taking the time to walk them through the agency. And it seems like, well, do we really need to do that? Everybody knows everyone in St. Paul. Well, yeah, we do. Not everybody knows the roles and responsibilities. So it's one way that we can touch base. And again, it's about connections. And so in conclusion, I'll wrap this up. And so in implementing an initiative and promoting a healthy workforce, it is a labor of love. As you all know, it takes a lot of hard work and dedication to move forward with significant change. Through this process, our leadership was provided invaluable insight on the importance of providing a healthy work atmosphere, meeting staff where they're at in their personal and professional journey, and then taking that time to spend with them, find their strengths, and really build from there. When staff feel supported and appreciated, they not only grow, but so does the agency. We recognize that this is one step in the process of developing a sustainable and healthy workforce. As we move forward in the work, we anticipate to continue our efforts to support the workforce through policies, trainings, and the promotion of a healthy work environment that encapsulates the Anangan cultures and value. And then if you would like any more information on what was discussed today, please go to the Center for Native Children and Family Resilient website, and you can find the majority of what we discussed today in hard copy.
So it looks like we're at the end, and we'd like to take this opportunity to thank you for attending today's webinar. And so I believe we have a few minutes to answer any questions you may have.
Check to see, Sarah, if people were unmuted, maybe that was already done, but just double checking.
Unfortunately, this is a Zoom webinar, which means folks are kind of permanently muted unless they're individually unmuted. So if folks have questions, if you could throw them in the chat, that would be great.
Thank you. People can also reach out, I think, to each one of us or any of us about any of the parts that we shared, and we'd be happy to connect them to the right resources as well.
There's a comment in the Q&A. It's not really a question, but just a comment. I wanted to share that. I can read it. It says WTN had a cooperative agreement similar to this, and we agreed in writing when and how things would be distributed. We have so many blended families at this time of age, it is hard, and withholding any information can be more damaging. It took our resources and stakeholders a lot of convincing, but we also asked how to make it the most comfortable when we gathered those pieces through conversation or recording. And there's a question that Sonia's, you're just going to answer that on.
I was going to, but I can just answer it out loud. So the question was, can you share a timeline for the project? How long from start to finish? So the TK project itself was a significant amount of time prior to the center's involvement. But just to give a general idea, that the center became involved with the Aleut Island of St. Paul in 2019 for this particular work. So the mind mapping and things like that began in 2019 and 2020, completing our evaluation and product development by September of 2022. So hopefully that answers your question.
There's another question. Did any of this work happen virtually or all in person? The visioning process, I mean. I assume document review and the like were virtual.
That's actually a great question, because as you think about the timing, as we began this work, it was in the fall of 2019. And we literally had just scheduled many on-site visits, as we had planned to be in person a lot, and then COVID hit. So we ended up setting up a virtual process where we completed meetings on a weekly and bi-weekly basis. We had frequent contact with the project. I don't know, Joe, if you want to add more, but we ended up, it ended up being very fruitful, because then we could also include folks from the island that may not have been able to attend because of both offices being in two different locations. So it actually worked well for this particular project.
Yeah, so we had, for the Txin Kaangux initiative, we had a total of 3 calls eventually per week. One was internally to CNCFR to make sure that we knew what we were doing when we got on a call with the with TKI. And then we'd have the TKI call where we'd work through the activities within our work plan. And then we'd also have a separate evaluation call where it was just nothing but evaluation, which we discussed. And so that went on for years.
Yeah, and outside of those meetings, then we had our own internal meetings here
Right.
At the tribe. It wasn't just something that could be done in a matter of an hour to a week. And so we would meet as a group and then meet individually with our staff, especially during the time we're doing the mind mapping. We did a lot of work there. And then when it came time to do the evaluation, it seemed like we spent hours upon hours on the evaluation portion of this project.
So Katie asked, we're happy that you have lots of questions, Katie. The question is, had you met in person with the community prior to transitioning to virtual, or was it started virtually? We had met with them in person prior to that. We had worked on establishing relationships, and that was a key part of the work that we did with all the communities that we worked with. on the website for all the projects, you'll see there is an implementation guide, which really is something that we worked with the community to be able to share. If you wanted to implement something similar in your community, what are things to consider, including costs, time, materials, things like that. I think the other piece, and Katie had a great question earlier, was about the tribal values and traditions. And so just to share with everybody that the only materials that are produced and put on the website for public consumption have been approved by each of the tribes that we worked with. In some of the communities, because of the nature of their traditions and culture, and they did not want that released, what we did was work with them to identify opportunities where other tribes could adapt that particular program, and we provided guidance with the help of the community on how other tribes could adapt that. So if you're looking at those materials, I think that might help with some of that. And we're also putting out some information on lessons learned, which really builds on the work that we did with relationship building in the first period of this project. And it looks like Dylan had a question, or no, Caitlin Scout, sorry. Trying to read it at the same time. Are you open to providing policy consultation in the future? I guess I would, if you're referring to Sheridan on that, or the whole team, I'm sure we'd be happy to talk with you about how we could be helpful. I don't know, Sheridan, if I just volunteered you for something that you.
Oh, no, that's great. I was also thinking, Ramona, this team did a lot of work, and it was when we first got the first version of Ramona's reframe on it, I was like, wow, I was enthralled. It was the first time policy and procedure was interesting to read, because it didn't feel punitive, and it didn't feel like, oh my gosh, if I do one thing wrong, then there's going to be a problem. So absolutely, I think this team could help anybody who's wanting the help or wants the assistance.
Yeah, thank you, guys. And just to let you know too, for those communities that may be working with Spanish language communities, Broader Impact does do bilingual work as well with those communities.
So Katie had a question about the lesson learned document and when we should look for it. It's interestingly enough, Katie, it's actually not going to be a document. It will be on the website, but we're really trying to take a different approach to having a interactive way for you to understand our lessons learned. So we have recordings and videos, and it will be it's a process of being loaded. So it should be, the first one should be out there. I believe our time frame is in the next month. So we should be working on having that out there, and please check back, or you can email us and we can let you know when it's available. Any other questions?
All right. Well, I just want to thank everybody who has joined us today once again for being here and taking the time, as well as our facilitators for your time today in presenting this incredible information. And it's amazing just to see the feedback and engagement already from our audience. And I think this is such a fantastic initiative. And I appreciate all of your work, not only in doing this work, but in getting ready for this presentation. For those of you that are still on, if you would like to share some feedback with us, we offer a couple different ways of sharing that. We will put in the chat a link to the survey. And The QR code on the screen as well. We offer a couple different ways to get to the survey. So if you have your phone around and you'd like to take a picture of the QR code, it will automatically send you to this very short feedback survey. As mentioned at the beginning, this helps us create useful products and materials. And we listen to all of your comments. And so I thank you once again, all of our presenters and all of our attendees for your time today. And I hope you have a great rest of your day.